Alright, let's talk about something that's been circling a lot of attention lately. Keith Rabois, who just rejoined the Opendoor board, made a comment on X that I think is incredibly important, not just for investors but for anyone who's ever bought, sold, or leased property. He said the future of Opendoor will cut out real estate agents. That's a bold statement, but when you stop and think about it, it makes total sense. Because if there's one part of real estate that's always felt frustrating, it's dealing with agents whose incentives don't always line up with yours. And as someone who owns multiple properties, I've seen this firsthand. Now, let me be clear here, I'm not saying every agent is bad or that they don't work hard. There are absolutely great agents out there. But the system itself, the way the incentives are structured, means that the agent isn't always pushing for the absolute best outcome for you as the property owner or buyer. Their commission doesn't change a whole lot whether the property sells or leases for a little less, or whether the process is handled with quality versus just volume. They want deals signed, contracts processed, and transactions moving, because that's how they get paid. And that creates a misalignment. I'll give you a concrete example from my own experience. I had a property that was being leased out for the first time. Naturally, I relied on the agent's insights because that's what you're paying for, right? Their expertise in the local market, their knowledge of what's achievable, and their supposed ability to maximize your return. Well, the agent suggested setting the rent at about $50 less per week than what I thought was realistic. And their reasoning didn't really account for the fact that the property was more upmarket compared to others in the same category. To them, it was just another property in the volume of deals they were handling. But I pushed back. I did my own research, compared listings in the area, factored in the unique qualities of the property, and realized they were undervaluing it. After challenging them, I ended up getting about $80 more per week than what they were originally advising me to aim for. Think about that difference. That's over $4,000 a year in extra rent, money that would have been left on the table if I had just trusted the agent's advice. And the crazy thing is, for them, that difference barely mattered to their commission. Whether I leased it for their suggested price or for the higher rent I achieved, their fee was only marginally impacted. That's the crux of the problem. Their incentives are not necessarily aligned with mine as the owner. And honestly, it makes them less appealing to deal with. Because while you're relying on their insights, you know deep down that they don't really care as much as you do about squeezing the most value out of your property. And I think that's a universal experience for a lot of buyers and owners. Now, let's take this frustration and scale it up to the broader US housing market. In America, agents typically take a 5 to 6% commission on home sales. That's a massive chunk of money, tens of billions of dollars across the market every year. And yet, the value they provide is being questioned more and more. Buyers and sellers are frustrated with the process. Lawsuits have been filed about how commissions are structured. And there's this growing sense that the entire model is outdated. This is where Opendoor steps in. Their entire premise is to simplify and streamline the process of buying and selling homes. Instead of dealing with agents, commissions, and all the headaches that come with it, they offer a tech-driven, database solution. With Opendoor, you can buy or sell a home at the tap of a button. The pricing is algorithmic, the transactions are fast, and the incentives are aligned with efficiency and trust, not commissions and volume. Keith Rabois saying that Opendoor's future involves cutting out agents altogether is basically confirming what a lot of us already feel: the middleman is becoming unnecessary. When you have AI, data models, and digital platforms capable of pricing homes more accurately than most agents, why would you continue to pay 5 or 6% to someone who may not even be incentivized to get you the best deal? Think about it like this: Amazon disrupted retail by cutting out the middleman and giving consumers a direct line to what they wanted. Uber disrupted taxis by connecting riders and drivers directly through technology. And now, Opendoor is positioning itself to disrupt real estate by eliminating agents as the necessary go-between. And just like with those other industries, it's not about whether consumers will accept it. It's about when they do. Because the efficiency, transparency, and cost savings are just too compelling to ignore. And here's the bigger picture. If Opendoor succeeds in cutting out agents, they're not just offering a better service. They're tapping into an enormous pool of money. That 5 to 6% commission pool in the US is worth tens of billions of dollars every single year. If Opendoor can redirect even a portion of that into shareholder value instead of agent commissions, then the upside for investors is massive. This is why Eric Wu, Keith Rabois, and Kaz Najatian keep talking about Opendoor as a generational company. Because they see this disruption not as a small tweak to the industry, but as a fundamental reshaping of how real estate works. And this is also why I think it's important to highlight that as an owner or buyer, you can't just rely on agents to do the heavy lifting for you. You have to do your own research. You have to know the market, understand the value of your property, and challenge the advice you're given. Because at the end of the day, no one cares about your property as much as you do. And that's the same mindset Opendoor is bringing to the table. They're building tools and platforms that empower owners and buyers to have more control, more transparency, and ultimately, better outcomes. Now, I know some people will push back and say, well, agents provide personal service, they guide you through the process, they're there to negotiate on your behalf. And sure, in some cases that's true. But let's not pretend that technology can't replicate or even improve on a lot of that. Negotiation, for example, is often less about hardball tactics and more about data and transparency. If you know the true value of a property through AI-driven models, there's less room for guesswork and games. And if the process is streamlined through a platform like Opendoor, then the need for hand-holding diminishes. Plus, let's be honest, buyers and sellers are increasingly comfortable doing these kinds of transactions digitally. We already buy cars online. We do our banking online. We manage our investments online. Why not homes? The pandemic accelerated this comfort level, and now companies like Opendoor are positioned to take advantage of it. And let's also factor in the cultural shift. Younger generations, especially millennials and Gen Z, are much more skeptical of traditional institutions and middlemen. They prefer direct, digital, transparent interactions. They don't want to deal with agents who may or may not have their best interests at heart. They want to feel in control. And Opendoor is building exactly the kind of platform that appeals to that mindset. So when Keith Rabois says agents are going to be cut out of the picture, he's not making a throwaway comment. He's pointing to the inevitability of disruption in an industry that has resisted change for far too long. And when I think about my own experiences, having to push back against an agent undervaluing my property by $50 a week and ultimately achieving $80 more, I realize just how much this disruption is needed. Because if even I, someone who spends a lot of time researching markets and thinking critically about value, could have been shortchanged by simply trusting an agent's advice, then how many others out there are in the same boat? How many owners are leaving money on the table? How many buyers are paying more than they should? Opendoor is solving that problem by aligning incentives with outcomes. They don't get paid for pushing volume. They succeed when the platform succeeds, when buyers and sellers are satisfied, when transactions are efficient, and when the data proves accurate. That's the kind of alignment that traditional agents simply can't offer. As investors, this is what excites me. Because it's not just about the short-term price action of the stock, or whether it closes a day green or red. It's about the structural change this company is bringing to an industry that touches everyone's life. Housing is the biggest asset most people will ever own. And right now, the system for buying and selling it is inefficient, costly, and misaligned. Opendoor is reimagining that system. So as I look at the future of Opendoor, I see a company that is building towards something much bigger than just facilitating transactions. They're building a platform for home ownership, one that cuts out inefficiencies, empowers individuals, and unlocks billions in value. And when you combine that with leadership like Kaz, the vision of founders like Eric Wu and Keith Rabois, and the passion of advocates like Eric Jackson, it's clear this isn't just a speculative play. This is the future of real estate. And maybe the most exciting part is that it resonates with ordinary people too. Investors get excited about numbers and valuations, but homeowners and buyers get excited about saving money, having control, and achieving better outcomes. That's the kind of disruption that spreads fast and sticks. And that's why I remain bullish, not just on the stock, but on the mission. So, when I hear Keith Rabois say that the future of Opendoor is cutting out agents, I nod my head. Because I've felt those frustrations personally. I've seen the misaligned incentives. I've had to fight to get the true value out of my property. And I know I'm not alone. The market is ready for this disruption. And Opendoor is the company building it.